Awesome. Great to see everyone. So for AI in the classroom, Glenn, you're hosting. Take it away.
You. Well, it wasn't scripted, but the last question was a great segue into the current session that we have of the AI in the classroom. I noticed that the first question to bring it up, I should thank Colleen Case, who just is another past chair of the Education Committee, who is here and is actually one of the people who convinced me to become a volunteer what seems like a long time ago. But we have two really good uh, and very different uh, presentations about AI in the classroom that I'm sure will allow us to push this discussion even further. So the first one will be Rochele Gloor from SVA, and I think, yes, she's here.
Yes, I'm here. Sure. Hello, Glenn. Thank you. I would like to ask my colleague, Michael Gold, to turn on his camera. He's going to be presenting with me. Yes, he's here. Awesome. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
Okay. Okay, and then slideshow. Okay. Thank you for having us. My name is Rochele Gloor. I'm Assistant Director for Innovation Technologies, and I'm here with my colleague and faculty, Michael Gold. We are from the MFA Computer Arts Department at the School of Visual Arts in New York. We have been using multimodal approach to integrating generative AI in the computer arts curriculum, which has been successful, fast, and non-disruptive. And I'm going to show 3 examples of full credit courses that we offer during 2024, fall 2024. Starting with programming for animators. So if Isaac hosts, he has used Claude Sonnet 3.5 since the beginning of the semester to teach Python, especially to write scripts for CG software such Maya and Houdini. This is an example of a student work, which was, can you all hear? Yeah. That was an example of a graphical user interface GUI project. It focused on practical applications where the students create custom tools to automate tasks, to have more control over their creative animations. And this can be done without AI, but we found out that the students without prior knowledge of programming language had higher quality work in comparison to the students who didn't use AI since the beginning of the semester, that was fall 2023. Here are some other examples of student work. They're just so fantastic. The next class is AI and Filmmaking, a critical exploration. With Anthony Giacchino, who is an Academy Award winner, documentary short film director. This class was created as a sandbox where the AI tools can be substituted as they evolve, not changing the structure of the class. They use ChatGPT, Midjourney, and Runway to create a silent documentary film as a group. Here you can see the Midjourney page, so we can look at the prompts, and that's the original image on the top right. Also here, Runway. So this class, it was based on factual research done by the faculty on Joe Petrosino, who is this person on the right. That's an original image. He was a famous New York detective and Italian immigrant in the beginning of the 20th century. And here is a teaser. The film hasn't been released yet, so we're just showing teasers as of now. Okay, and the next class is Innovating with Generative AI with Michael Gold. He's going to talk fastly about it. Just a point, this class has been remodeled to be offered to the whole graduate studies, the whole graduate school at SVA. Michael, if you want to.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. So this class, Innovating with Generative AI, it spun out of a computational image class that we were teaching, and which originally was focused around a lot of procedural content generation. But with the advent of Stable Diffusion a few years ago, I started teaching the students how to integrate Stable Diffusion within their pipeline. And originally with that, what I would do is I would show them the professional tools, like what Adobe could do, and then show them the limits of those tools, and then take them into applications that they could run locally. So our computer lab has, we have in the lab classrooms, we have 20 computers with NVIDIA 4090s on them. They're great, and they can do a lot with the open source models. So originally we did it with Automatic 1111. For the last 2 years, we've been doing it with Comfy UI. And I'll say this, that one of the biggest challenges is in teaching from a university computer lab is actually getting the development environment set up on the systems. I think that's overwhelming for a lot of students to do at home, even with strict YouTube tutorials, and it's complicated to get done on the computer lab. So if anybody wants more tips and tricks to how to get those development environments set up quickly, just message me on here or on LinkedIn. I've got files that you can download and just install with one click. But that has been the biggest challenge, is getting the software installed. And looking forward to talking with everyone. Thanks, Rochele.
I'm just going to show my favorite this student that's using Stream Diffusion in TouchDesigner. And that's a technology that has been found its way in the performance arts. That's why we are showing here. And yes, thank you. These are our emails. We are happy to discuss later. You want to stop sharing? Okay.
All right, Paul.
Okay.
You good?
Thank you. We have another, and then we'll have questions afterwards. We have another presenter from Middle Tennessee State University, Paul Griswold. And
Hey there.
There you are.
I'm a little intimidated by all the brilliant people I'm listening to here. This is very impressive. So I hope I bring at least a little bit of value. But this is amazing. I'm just so impressed with everyone. And I think, a lot of you may know some of the things I'm going to talk about, but this also, I'm hoping, will help start conversations with departments and colleagues who are very hesitant to get into these kinds of things. We also run into a lot of questions about not only the ethics, but how does it work? Where is this information coming from? So hoping this will at least help start conversations with your fellow faculty members. So I'm going to talk about GPTs, but this will work for other things like Claude or Gemini, other large language models. But I'm using GPT simply because they allow the most amount of data to be input into a custom GPT. The reason I got into it is that just a large language model, generally, you can have hallucinations, you can have trouble with the data. So I looked into this, and one thing that might come up is do I have to have my students pay for all of this? But no, you don't. You have to, if you're using OpenAI's custom GPT, do have to have a paid account to create it. But the students can have access to this for free. And I use Microsoft Teams in my classes, and I will just embed it right into a channel so that they know exactly where to go when they have a question to use this. And essentially, you're giving it information specific to your class and training it on that. So here's essentially how you put it together. And again, you can do the same thing with Gemini, Claude, all this. I just found this the most flexible and allowing the most amount of data. So, you know, those of you teaching things like animation, motion graphics, visual effects things, you have lab time and you have students there 24 hours a day. And when something goes wrong, they need help. And they don't want to hear, send me an email, I'll get back to you in 2 or 3 days. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. After Effects has gone down. What do I do? And so I've started putting these things together because they need help, and you don't want them just searching Google, searching Reddit, maybe finding something that is sort of works, but it's hacky or it's dated or going to cause other troubles. So by creating a custom GPT specific to your class, you can ensure that it's got the information from your syllabus. So I'm putting in every single project that's required, what they're required to do, my office hours, how to contact me, anything that they need specific to that class goes in to creating that. So this is just what you'd see if you went to creating it, and this is, you get to the configuration. So this is my chat PCG, which are my initials for a visual effects class. And you're essentially instructing it what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to do, and then what kind of questions might be asked. And it helps it understand what's expected of it. It will then follow these guidelines. And beyond that, you then can go and put in things like, I have the entire DaVinci Resolve manual, the Fusion 18. Sorry, I'm not a Nuke user. I've been using Fusion since 1997. The After Effects manual, my syllabus, every single project, it's all in there. And the instructions you give it are, you refer to the PDFs that I have given you. You do not search the internet. You do not make up answers, and that's it. But you need to instruct it, and then you need to test it. You have to say, I did a test where I said, hey, I'm in Professor Griswold's class for project 2. I would like to print out my animation on paper and mail it. Is that okay? And it answered, yes, of course that's okay. So then you have to go and correct it. So you do need some setup time to tell it what's an okay response, what's not an okay response. And I had issues where it was telling students an office that was a building that didn't exist. So a trick I discovered is open up a secondary ChatGPT window, generic, and you say, I'm training a GPT. This is the problem I'm having. Tell me how to tell you to never do this again. It will then provide you with the wording for itself that will make sure it doesn't give the wrong answer, which seems very bizarre to me, but it works. And so I found that students are able to say, well, what is expected for project 2? What am I supposed to be delivering? Where does it go? Do I need to include a self-assessment? How does that get added? Or things like, hey, I'm using After Effects and suddenly I've got color bars. What happened? Why? And it'll tell you, you've moved your footage. Here's what you need to do. And then a lot of times you have students who don't know what to do for the project. And so based on what the project parameters on, it'll say, hey, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing this? And it helps them come up with project ideas. So it's been very, very, for the students who use it, very exciting. It is, we're running into issues where students are told in high school, all AI is cheating. They get to the university and they won't touch it. Nope, that's cheating. That's cheating. I'm not going to. So that's been an issue to discuss with them. And so what I've learned over is it's really good when you've given it all that information at giving back technical information. I have the entire Python scripting guide for Resolve and Fusion in there, so it can answer those questions in a way that's easily digestible. It helps them continue to work when they're in the lab. They don't feel like, okay, I've got to quit and I have to wait for class time to get help. And the challenge is that, yes, it will occasionally say it's okay to print your animation on paper and send it through the mail. You need to check it, especially when you've updated it with a new syllabus. And it certainly can't replace hands-on instructions yet. And so in the future, I've started looking into things like HeyGen, which you can do a duplicate of yourself including your voice, and using it to recap my own lessons. So I can feed it. This is what we study this week. Make a 2-minute wrap up using that, and it will then, I could put that into Teams as a message, using things like you've probably seen Google's Notebook LM that will generate a podcast that is interactive. You can ask the podcast hosts. So I did one just as a test with my syllabus, and you can then ask about things and it will respond. I haven't dug into it much. And then the most interesting one outside of this is Google AI Studio with the streaming feature, where you can load up Maya and it can see your screen and you can say, I'm trying to do this, and it will walk you through step by step what button to press, where to go. But of course, the issue there is FERPA. You can't have students just doing things like that. But it is very exciting, and I'm hoping that at some point Google will get some kind of compliance. So beyond that, it is it is really, I think, very valuable for classes, especially where you can't have a teaching assistant. You need something to provide that extra help for students who need it, because you can't be on 24 hours a day. The students would love that, but you can't do that. And it really, I've noticed, helps the little problems that come up all the time. It takes care of. And as I said, yeah, they've heard that it's cheating, but every student I've had who've used this really found a lot of value in that, the immediate answers. I don't know how fast I went, but it feels like I just did everything in 2.5 minutes that should have been 5. But I'm happy to answer questions.
That was terrific. Based on, I don't know if you're looking at some of the messages that have been coming, but these 2 sessions were both they're great. There are a lot of questions. I guess one of the things that's come up from a couple of people is a little bit more detail, or how to actually implement this or deploy this to the students. And you also mentioned something about FERPA there. Where are the constraints or roadblocks with FERPA? Have you been able to overcome that? For those who don't know, or maybe you can explain to them what that even is, because we deal with it.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so, but I did actually do quite a bit of research, and of course, you cannot identify a student, and specifically students in your class and their grades. Those are the 2 big no-nos. But it's a gray area, because there's directory information. So unless the student has opted out of being listed in the directory for the university, you have the right to say this student is attending the university. So there's some areas there. But companies like Microsoft, they have agreements that if you use that's why I use Teams instead of D2L or Blackboard, because it's closer to Discord, and students love Discord. But Discord's not FERPA compliant. Teams is. The ins and outs, I'm not entirely sure, but you have to be careful of the student information getting out publicly. So the GPT, I pay for it. It's in my name. They're just asking it questions. They don't go in and identify, I'm in this class, this is my name. They're just asking questions about the projects. So I'm not sure if I'm answering, or if I'm just bloviating and listening to my own voice.
The other question that I've had is, well, actually a couple of things. One, there's been a couple of people who've asked if to be able to get in touch with you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if perhaps you could just type in your contact information in the chat so that people can contact you for this. I think there's a number of questions about implementation. I think both these presentations have inspired people to try things that they may not have tried before, which is terrific. I'll come back to you, but I do have a question for Rochele. And you're looking at different AI applications to generate things. Have you found that there are differences between specific applications? Generative, there are, whether you go from any of the Firefly or ChatGPT 4 or Spring AI or Midjourney. There are a number of out there. Have you looked at what it's like to use one versus the other?
Yes, I used to do that last year around October, November. I would every day in the morning I would open and then type the same prompt in different to ChatGPT. There was DALL-E back then, and Adobe Firefly, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion, which was its own interface. And it was really interesting. And then I could see when they were kind of like trying to assess bias, especially on Adobe Firefly. But then now I personally don't generate too many images. I don't really use that. I use more for like generating backdrops for presentations, for example, or just to represent something about that tool. Usually I would use ChatGPT or Midjourney. Midjourney is way more complex and sophisticated in its generation of images. Of course, then you go to, you know, custom applications, like if you go to Stable Diffusions and you start to be more specific to what you want to build. So yes, definitely there are different tools, and then they act differently. Also, in relation to video generation, I've been using Crea, Luma, Runway. We've had this partnership with Runway. They're both Luma and Runway. They're very similar in terms of what you can create, but then it's interesting that you have the extended version, you know, how to extend videos, and also some of them now you can be in front of the camera and it can understand your facial features, so you can talk and then it can replace your face to the character that you are creating. So that's something that we are trying. And then within that, there's like different versions also. And then each version has a different outcome and output. And what some things that we noticed within the AI and filmmaking class is that there was sometimes that the image didn't want to generate the way that you wanted, like walk forward towards the door. And it was because the image that was uploaded had some kind of transparency. And then the student that was working on it brought to Photoshop, and then she couldn't just like, you know, like clone stamp to remake that part of the cape of the person. She had to use the generative AI inside of Photoshop not to mess with the pixels in order for Runway to understand what it was. And as Paul was saying that you had to open ChatGPT to ask how you approach ChatGPT to problem solve. The same thing they had to do. They had to bring their prompts to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to write a prompt for Runway. So because the tools were created with following very, you know, it's very proper structure, and you have to use the same terminology, the same hierarchy. So those are all like super interesting, like experiential learning moments.
I just had a quick question for you. Did you participate in the Gen 48 festival with Runway at all? It was very interesting.
No, I didn't.
The Runway put on a thing called Gen 48. I think it's similar to SIGGRAPH's 24-hour competition, but it is a 48-hour generative film festival. I participated with one student in the Gen 48 and learned a lot about exactly that. You end up generating hundreds and hundreds of videos to get the one shot that does what you want.
Yeah.
And the student came away understanding that, oh, this is not simply just you type it and you get exactly what you want and it's perfect. And now my job is gone because it's a lot of work and a lot of time.
Yes.
So another question. Now, Paul said that for his, you know, custom implementation, he did this through ChatGPT and purchased it himself. Do you find that the students are purchasing their own, or is the school doing it, or are they just trying to go from one trial version to the next? Because a number of them now are either limiting the amount of free generation that they can have, if at all, or they're slowing it down for when they offer it free compared to their paid versions?
No students have paid for it. We're a state school. We have a lot of kids who they're the first in their entire family to go to university, and so to ask them to spend that money. So, but students are also very, very clever. So there's lots of ways to create email address and keep using that free trial. They'll find a way around the rules if they really want to use it. But the limitations are fairly broad. You get quite a bit of time to use it per month. At least that's been my experience. I've never had anybody run out, and if it did, they were working with a partner who then the partner asked the questions. So far it hasn't been an issue, but I would love if the universities would start to support, just like we pay for Adobe Creative Cloud, include these kinds of things.
I have a little bit of a different take. So my take with the tokens for paying is that it's kind of similar to like when we were all kids and played in the arcade and you play Street Fighter 2 and you have a quarter, you put it in the machine. If you don't die, if you don't get beat, you keep playing. But you can only get so good because eventually you run out of quarters. But then when the game came to Super Nintendo, you brought it home, you got to play at home with your friends, you had unlimited quarters. So I think of the open source models when you get to run it on your own computers and you get to run on the lab computers at school, you can run 1,000 generations overnight and pick the best ones out of all those dice rolls for all the different generations that you ran. And that really opens up a totally different level of experimentation for the students because they're not they can run as much as the GPUs will let them do. And it's just like if the GPUs aren't humming and strumming, then they're being underutilized. So I'm like, just go for it. So anyway, that's kind of how I think about it. Also the tinkering, the levers that you can pull with the open source models are just so much more. So it really opens up a lot of differentiation that for the students to put their own spin on it. Because like everything from Midjourney, it looks like it came from Midjourney to some degree, right? But the differentiation that you can get from the open source models, especially when you bring LoRa's into the fact, are really, really high.
They're trying to. I'm sorry. I'm reading his questions. Well, all right. So, the last question that I have is, Paul also talked about the transition from high school into college and the notion that it's cheating, and I at least still have trouble with students who don't feel that it's their own if they accept help from from AI. How do you find that when you move to animation, or at what point does that go away? At what point do the inhibitions for using it in a creative way rather than just copying it, when does that happen in the process?
In animation, it's been very difficult. What we have been talking about with our students is, at least for things like the capstone films, is this is not something you're going to use for your characters, for the story. I mean, maybe you use ChatGPT to brainstorm ideas, but when you have a student team and you need background elements, you need trees, you need things on a wall or a shelf, that's where this becomes useful because you're focused in now on the story and the performance of your characters and how the rigs work. You're not so much concerned about, okay, somebody needs to model the teapot and the cups and all of that. They can now focus in on what they really enjoy doing, which is the performance and the animation. So that's where I found it really useful. Again, we're a state school, so anyone can declare themselves an animation major. So you have people coming in who they've never heard of what Photoshop is. They don't know what Maya is. And so they're really starting from nothing. So they need to focus in on, this is the skill I want to learn to go out and get a job. And they don't want to just be modeling props. So things like that I found very useful, and they're accepting of that for sure.
Yeah, we go over, we have the same issue. Some students don't want to do because it's not they feel that it's not their work. But we found out that this kind of like multimodal approach, where within a course that doesn't teach AI, we can bring a guest lecturer to introduce something. And then also, Michael Gold teaches this very like, ahead of the curve kind of class. So having this balance, and then it's like, students see what the others are doing and they try to approach that, and telling them that's more like an experimentation, that you need to have some kind of experience with AI tools before they graduate in order to be better qualified for maybe someone who doesn't have that, they might be, their resumes might be better if they have tried.
We've already gone over, but I'm going to ask one more question, because it goes to scale. I guess Paul talked about the character versus the props or the background, and then I think about a place like us where we have architects and interior designers where the background is what those people create. So at what point then does it still become theirs? In other words, is it just, well, if I'm focusing on the character, then the background doesn't really matter, I can take from anywhere? Or does everything have to be theirs, at least to the extent that is it theirs once they create the prompt? And there's a whole question of ethics and who owns what, and I don't think we're going to solve it. So I'll give you one last, before we close for a short break, I'll give you one last chance to answer these. Both of you.
I have a little bit of a point of view on that, Glenn. So the one of the things I think about is, well, something important that the artist has to do is get 100 bad ideas crumpled up into the waste can, thrown away, to pick the one good idea that they actually move forward on. And so that is important, right? Coming up with those 100 bad ideas to pick the one good one, and that involves the artist's eye, right? Like how they're going to do it. So like kind of almost overnight, people went from using Google image search to get all these ideas to make the mood board to using generative AI to make all the ideas that they move forward on. So if it's only used in concepting phase and then you're doing everything by hand, I don't think you have the ethics issue at all, right? Because it's just concept art. But then if you're using it and you're manipulating, you're moving around pixels, or you're moving around vertices, if you're doing 3D art, well, then you're kind of kit bashing, as people often have done with game dev. So again, like there's kits that credit the original artist and there's kits that don't, like that. But that's been done in industry for a very long time. But the artists are still putting the finishing touches on it to make it look like a fully composited scene. So I think it's like what we're seeing is something very similar to that. And I think that, it does raise, there are a lot of questions, but firms like Adobe are really working hard to credit back original artists, and so same with Unreal with what they're doing. You have to list if something was made with AI. So I think we're gonna see the industry develop around that. Anyway, sorry, long answer, but that's kind of how.
That's right. And I know there's more to say, but we're already almost halfway through our break. So I want to thank everybody, and this was terrific. I think hopefully this discussion can continue in other formats and venues. So I'm going to turn this back to Nick.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Rochele, Michael, Paul.
Nick.
Just absolutely fantastic session. This is what it's all about. And yeah, as Glenn said, we want to see this conversation continue. So hopefully you will all have, submit to the Educators Forum for the 2025 conference. And I would love to be able to run into everybody up in Vancouver.